How many of you have heard of the Pied Piper of Hamelin? How many of you have heard this story? One of the variations of it. For a lot of people, the Pied Piper of Hamelin has a very rudimentary moral. And that moral is essentially to pay your debts. That you shouldn't try to cheat a cheater, basically. You shouldn't try to cheat someone who you owe. The story, if you're not familiar with it, is this idea of this ancient city in Germany called Hamelin. And this was this town that had a terrible rat infestation. And the infestation had gotten so bad that they had to use unusual means of dealing with their problem. Because the regular means that you would use weren't working. They tried everything. I mean, whatever you might think of in that period. I don't know if they had maybe poisons or whatever, but the story goes that they tried everything. They'd go through, I guess they used cats, dogs, whatever. Or maybe because they got rid of cats. I don't really know. That's not the point of the story. They tried everything and nothing worked. And they decided to hire a rat catcher to deal with the problem. Now, there's many variations of this story, but it's very important to know that the rats weren't just like a few rats. I mean, we're talking about, like, in most of the renditions of the story, people couldn't go to bed. The rats were living on the table with them. They weren't even scared of the people anymore. You couldn't shoo them away. They were just a menace. So there's many variations of the story, but the most basic version of this story is the rat catcher, the Pied Piper himself. He agrees to deal with the rats. And hope you don't mind I'm reading some notes just because I want to make sure I get everything right here. He agrees to deal with the rats as long as the city pays him a fee of, according to most stories, 1,000 guilders. So it's a lot of fucking money. It'd be like $1 million, I guess, in today's money or something. In the story, that's supposed to be a lot of money. And the town, the council or whatever, the mayor agrees to these terms. And the Pied Piper uses his magical flute and his hypnotic song, and he uses this to lure all the rats in the city to follow him. And he leads them all out of the town and drowns them in a local river. All of that, of course, was save for one rat that was deaf. So the Pied Piper returns for his payment, but the city mayor refuses to pay him. Basically, however you want to do it, he basically cheated him. And the Pied Piper vows to return again. And sure enough, he comes back I don't know, however long, much later, and he leads away all but 3 children. And different stories of them say that, they were some being given away as slavery, sent to Transylvania to be slaves, that they were killed. Others say that they were eventually returned. And today this story, and to this day, this story is treated as a real historical legend. It's widely accepted that the children did vanish, that this was a true story in some way. Now, maybe there wasn't like a Pied Piper who did this, but there really is a legend that these children disappeared. And a lot of people say it was probably like a plague or, that there was a tragedy, that the Pied Piper represents some form of just a death event, like maybe there was an earthquake and people died, something like that. Some people even said there was people emigrated, they just left and whatever. But what actually happened to these children isn't what concerns me today. What concerns me today is one of the lesser known variants of the story. In this variant, the mayor of Hamelin doesn't refuse to pay the piper simply because he is cheap, but because he claims he believes the piper to be an extortionist. He believes that the piper brought the rats to Hamelin to trick the town into paying him to remove the rats from the city. And this is, I think, the most valuable version of the story. Every other version of the story is just kind of like, don't cheat your laborer, don't cheat the guy who does your plumbing or something, because don't make fun of the guy who wraps up your food at the McDonald's because he might spit in it, that kind of thing, which is a valuable lesson. But that's like a base level lesson. I want to talk about something I mentioned in a post today on Facebook, the Hegelian dialectic, which is this idea that you can introduce a problem which will cause a reaction in people, whether they be leaders or just the general populace. And this reaction will be like a call for change, a call for help, a call for dramatic change, quick change. And then as a response to these calls, the leaders or other people that are involved will enact these outrageous solutions that they could not normally do. And that's highlighted in this story very well. You have a situation where the townspeople are traumatized by these rats. These rats are ruining their town, making their lives a living hell. They can't put up with it anymore. And so they're willing to pay this, unsavory, weird, questionable, shady guy who says he's a rat catcher who can catch him with his flute. They're willing to pay him 1,000 guilders, which, again, in the story is supposed to be a really large sum of money. I mean, it's like a king's ransom, basically. So they're willing to do this exorbitant fee to pay this person to rid them of this problem. And then, of course, they refuse to pay and he takes away the children. And it begs the question, from an occultist mindset, from someone who, part of what I'm interested in as an occultist, one of my focuses is on bending people's, maybe not will, but bending their perceptions so that I can have them do things that I want, so that I can influence them and understand how my mind could be influenced, because I don't want to be influenced by others unfairly. And you have the very obvious ways. You have rhetoric, the trivium, rhetoric, logic, and I forget what it is, but the three basic forms of dialogue that are meant to be part of debate and learning and all that kind of stuff. So you can just be honest and tell people truths and try to make convincing arguments, convincing rhetoric, and try to get people to change their mind using logic, or you can use more subtle methods, sometimes very insidious methods of influence. For example, when you are, let me give you an example. I can even show you. If a person's sitting like this, and their tone is much more even and measured, you treat them a different way. You see them as having a certain kind of power and authority. Do you not? Versus when someone's talking to you like this and they seem a little animated and nervous, there's a difference, isn't there? Some of that is mimetic. Some of this is based around the idea that human beings have built in them certain symbolism, certain expectations of behavior. And when you alter that behavior, you can create subtext, a way to communicate with the subconscious mind of the person observing you and get them to think of you a certain way. Now, I don't always make use of it. Sometimes I act animated and more nervous, and that's just because I forget that I can do it the other way, like I'm doing now. But my point is that when you are doing this stuff, when you're seeing this, when you're a person like me and you can kind of pull this out, you can see this on television. You can see this in the way news is reported to you. You can see this in the way propaganda is presented to you. You can learn to read subtext. You can learn to read memes and understand what the subtext is, what the intention is. And it's not a infallible sense. It's not like I can read everything perfectly. But just knowing that there's a subtext sometimes is all you need to know. Sometimes just knowing that they're not being honest with you is all you need to know. And in the last generations of the Western world, really all over the world, there has been this steady shift from the media and your various entertainment industries entertaining you and informing you to manipulating you. And it's become more and more transparent. It's become more and more insidious. And it went from kind of harmless commercialism, maybe 30 years ago or so. And maybe not harmless, but mostly harmless. So you could kind of turn a blind eye to it because it wasn't as bad seeming. To today, where it is so blatant and so intentional that it is we'll say mind numbing and mind blasting and mind, it tears me down. It makes me really upset to watch television or do any of these things. Because I don't like being lied to. As someone who's an empath, someone who knows how to manipulate, someone who knows how to use body posture, vocal tones, who knows how to manipulate a sentence structure even. When I see these things being done to me, I go, nope, I don't want anything to do with it, and I turn it off. Now, I'm actually kind of really proud of the kinds of followers that I have on Facebook. Because I'm sure a lot of people didn't comment or didn't, they just kind of skipped over it, or they read it and they didn't agree with it, and they didn't want to be rude, so they didn't say anything. But every single person who saw it and made a reaction was a positive one. And every single person who interacted with it with a comment, it gives me a lot of hope that there's a lot of people out there who already understand this. They don't have to have me teach them this. This is something that's already really well known in occult circles, whether it's known factually as I'm presenting it as a bunch of examples, or just intuitively. They just know there's something wrong with it. So let me get back a little bit to this idea of the Hegelian dialectic. We create a situation, or we capitalize on a situation. So we can either create a tragedy, or we can hitch our horses up to a tragedy. And we can create a situation where people are desperate for a solution. And desperate people make very bad decisions. And I can tell you this because when I was a bouncer, the handful of times I've had to do anything, the people in question made very bad decisions because they were under stress. So if I'm holding you by the collar and I'm telling you get the hell out, and you had maybe a little too much to drink, and I'm giving you no time to make the decision, you're going to tend to maybe make a bad decision. So I would try to make it a habit of saying, I'm going to say it 3 times, I'm going to say it a few times, I'm going to give you a chance to decide. Are you going to leave, or are you going to face, the hard way? And the same thing applies to many situations in our life. If you have an emergency come up, and you don't have a lot of time to make a decision, it's very difficult to make a very smart decision. I remember not too long ago, my father, he was in a bad accident. And this accident was, he hit a deer on his motorcycle. And in the course of this accident, he broke his leg, and it was a bad break. He's bleeding internally or whatever. It's very bad. And he goes unconscious on the side of the road. And someone runs over his leg because they didn't see his wreck. For whatever reason, maybe the motorcycle, I don't know the whole story because he lives far away. And I only know what he knows, which is a very cloudy, foggy memory because he was unconscious most of it. But his wreck must have been off in the gutter, whereas he must have still been on the road somehow, and his leg was maybe sticking out in the road. However it happened, a car ran over his foot, and the damage that was already done was exacerbated to the point of no return, and they had to amputate one of his feet. And he was unconscious, he nearly died, the whole works. Now, they gave me the choice. They said, we can try to save the foot, we can remove the foot, or we can remove the leg below the hip, basically, like somewhere around the thigh. And they said, the success rate for each one is different. Taking off, leaving on the foot had the lowest success rate. He'd have a foot, but it would be a useless blob of meat that would probably cause him pain and problems for the rest of his life because the bones were pulverized. There was nothing to heal, basically. They could remove the foot, and there was a chance that, although slim, that he would be able to walk with a prosthetic from below the knee. And they said there was like a 50-50 chance or something like that it would work out. And then the highest percentage chance was to take the leg off above the knee because there was a lot of damage to the knee as well. And if they did that, he would, yes, be able to walk with a prosthetic, but he'd basically be on a more like a wheelchair or crutches for most of the rest of his life. It wouldn't be like easy walking. He'd be hobbling around with a very, not a lot of function in his leg. And I was sitting there, and it was up to me to make that decision. And I'm the type of person I can make a snap decision. And I can usually do it logically. I don't always have an emotional problem. Usually if there's a crisis, I sometimes freak out. It really depends on who's around me. Like if my wife's around me and it's a crisis that's happening to me, I tend to be more emotional. But if it's a crisis that's happening and I'm on my own, or it's not someone like my wife around where I feel more vulnerable or sensitive or whatever, I tend to harden up and I tend to make better decisions. And I think quicker. Well, in this case, there was just my mother and my sister there, and I had to make the decision because nobody else was seeming to be able to make it. And I decided to amputate the foot. And I said, this is what he'd want me to do. This is what he would want me to do. Now, everybody else in the room was saying, don't take his foot off. It's so horrible. How can you do that to him? And give him a chance and everything else. And I'm weighing the odds, and I'm thinking to myself, I have to trust the doctor. The doctor's telling me if I take and I leave the foot, the chances are he's going to be, well, he wouldn't be able to walk anyway. It would just be a blob of meat. He'd be stuck in a wheelchair. It wouldn't be usable. And although I don't always have the greatest relationship with everyone in my family, including my father, I remember how much joy he had in hiking and hunting, fishing. And I said to the doctor, in the most likely best case scenario, would he be able to do those things again someday before he gets too old? He says, unlikely, but yes, it's much more likely if you just take the foot off and leave it rather than taking it off above the knee and so on. And so I had to process all of this and make a smart decision, because we couldn't wait long or else it could kill him, because the blood, there could be sepsis, there could be all kinds of problems. So I had to make a decision right then. Now, luckily I made the right one. Luckily I made a decision that not only saved his life, but he was up and walking around within 6 months. Walking around. He went hunting with me the very next fall. Now, most people would say that's a miracle. He's in his late 60s. Most people don't bounce back from something like that. I got lucky. But I had made sure to take a deep breath and think very carefully about my decision. I had to weigh my emotional response and my logical response. I had to decide whether I wanted to trust the Pied Piper or not. Now, in this particular case, it's an organic crisis. Okay, this wasn't like someone had set him up and caused the problem. But put yourself in that situation. A loved one is in crisis, and you've got to make a decision. So what we're faced with in our culture today is there are elements of our society, call them the media, call them government, call them whatever you want, call them your next door neighbor, that are smart enough to create for you crises where they will make you feel like you don't have a choice and you have to make a decision right now. When I say you don't have a choice, I mean you don't have you can't afford to wait. You have to decide right now. Because it's a crisis, it's a tragedy, kids died. We have to act right now, and here's the solutions. These are the only ones we have. Pick one. Now, as many of you may know, I don't like to talk about my deeper politics at all, because we live in a climate of angst, fear, anger, and childish behavior by people. It's never popular to talk politics. Never. But this is actually a day and age where you can actually talk religion much more easily than you can talk politics with a random stranger. I could go up to a random stranger and tell them I'm a Luciferian demon sorcerer and probably just get stared at. But if I told them my political views, there's a 50-50 chance that they'll be offended just by what I think. Doesn't matter what side it's on. They will be mad. 50-50 chance. What we're seeing in our culture right now is a corporatized media organization in bed with government, etc. Their agenda is to stir up controversy. Their agenda is to stir up bad feelings, to make people mad at one another. And they're doing this for profit. And they're doing this for power. They're creating a crisis for you, that if you're absorbed in this crisis, you are going to believe that there must be a solution. And that solution in this most recent case is going to be something to do with guns. Or it's either going to be to remove the guns, or you're going to be very defensive about your gun rights. Either way, Everyone is backed up against the wall and told you must make a decision right now. You can't make these decisions when you are emotionally conflicted. You cannot be held responsible for decisions made in the heat of a moment of a crisis, the same way that you can if you have time to think. There's a reason why someone who murders somebody in cold blood gets a bigger sentence than someone who, in the heat of an argument, hauls off and does something stupid. They'll still go to jail. They still might get a life sentence. They still might, but there's always a reduced penalty. There's a sort of assumption of understanding that people in a crisis can't make very good decisions. These people know this. This is an occult thing. This is, in prior generations, before the Enlightenment period, before we had, the founding fathers and the French Revolution and all these people who were, bringing out these ideas of liberty and freedom to the world. Before we had this proliferation of understanding, before the Renaissance, especially before that, during the dark and medieval ages, this is how the oligarchs and elite ruled the world, was by creating fear and creating propaganda, creating tribalistic conflict so that they could manipulate their people into making them rich, making them powerful. The peasants didn't they weren't serfs at first because they didn't have a choice. They chose that life, and they chose that life because they saw no other alternative. They needed someone to protect them. They were willing to, give the king his due so that his guards and knights and whatever could provide for them. They would create the surplus, agriculture that was necessary to support those people so that they didn't have to farm. They could just train to fight and so on. And they created this crisis with all their fighting. Now, maybe it was organic. Maybe they really were just fighting. That's kind of irrelevant. But they didn't give the people much of a choice. They didn't give them a lot of time to think about it. Here, the raiders are over the hill. You can either, you can either support your king with your tithes, with your, with your taxes, or you can be out in the cold and whatever. And that's before the tax man came to collect and put people on the chopping block. So we're living, and a lot of you know this. A lot of you who are watching this are just going to be nodding your head going, I know that already, Thorne. Thank you very much. But not everybody does. If you're new to occult working, if you're new to these things, if you look in certain occult manuals, you will see little symbolic references to things like this. Ways to manipulate culture are hidden in there. Even if it's just in the symbolism they use to describe demons or magical workings. These kinds of things are how the elite rule you. They are how they are confident in their ability to... They don't have to go on witch hunts anymore to get rid of the competition anymore. They have our culture so wrapped up, lock, stock, and barrel, that the minority of us that are aware and see things that are going on, even as powerful as we are, we don't have the platform to make the changes necessary to do what we do, to maybe liberate people, any more than what I can do. It's like... You'll notice that in most cultures, if you have a guru who knows what's up, the state doesn't go after the guru. Usually, unless it's a really insular state where they're very uptight, they let the guru go. They let him be on top of the mountain. They let the people who are willing to climb that mountain talk to him. So long as when they come back to town, they go back to work and they don't screw around. So they allow those of us who are willing to stand up a little bit of breathing room, at least in a culture like ours today. But the problem is, we live in a culture, and we've lived in this culture for a while, that has an uptight attitude about conformity. In the prior generations, when I was a young kid, I'm a Gen X kid, I'm 42, it was the Bible-bashing Christians, the pearl-clutching moralists, the satanic panic people who were afraid of Dungeons and Dragons and heavy metal and all that. And they would constantly, constantly ostracize people like me for being different. And it was a very uptight society. And what happens when that happens? When you have an uptight society, you have a revolution against that. You have, punk and goth subculture, heavy metal, and this proliferation of Luciferianism and Satanism. These little pushbacks. But you have to be careful, because when you have a society that doesn't like the outsider, doesn't like the weirdo, doesn't like people to be offensive or something like that, very quickly that culture, especially the one that preaches peace and love nonstop, that's the one you got to watch out for. Because that's the culture that can very quickly snap into a very fascist, a very authoritarian state. Because people will do for you, people will do things what they think are for your own good in a crisis to save you that will hurt you. As Alan Watts had often said, "Kindly let me help you, or you will drown," said the monkey to the fish as he carried him safely up a tree. We are reaching a stage in our culture that is not organically generated. We are not looking at an organic movement of people who are mad at one another just because they have a difference of opinion. We're looking at a manufactured outrage. We're looking at a manufactured crisis that the media, the propaganda, the corporations, government, they're all behind in some way, in some capacity, to get you to make a decision that ultimately makes you more of a serf than you ever were before. And they will tell you that they're doing this for your own good, that you're going to be given money and power, that you're going to be set free. But that's not how it works. It's not how any of this works. It's not how it's ever worked. That never has ever happened. Never. Anyway, guys, I didn't want to make this political, but I guess it got a little bit. But I think I managed to steer clear of taking sides. But I want you guys in the next couple of days, while all of this is going on, try not to get emotional any more than you have to. If you knew people, if you live in the towns where these things happen, these shootings, or whatever crisis is going on when you're watching this, because it's not going to just be about these shootings, guys. Wherever you are, whenever you are, when you're watching this, take a step back. Remember the Pied Piper of Hamelin. Remember the Hegelian dialectic. Remember my story of my father. Remember all of this that I'm saying to you. Know that I'm being sincere. I don't judge you for being different. I don't judge you for having a different opinion than me necessarily. So long as your opinion is not one that's going to harm me somehow. You don't even have to like me. Just trust me. They don't have your best interests at heart. They never have. They never will. The first thing a Luciferian learns is that if you want to be free, you have to set yourself free. You cannot expect government, parents, religion, or even me, or Lucifer for that matter, to set you free. You have to be your own light bringer. You have to be your own liberator. And that means you have to learn to be independent. You have to learn to be able to say, I don't want any more than is utterly necessary for me to get by in terms of assistance. You have to be responsible for your own actions in your own life. If you want to be a powerful sorcerer, if you think that you can do this, if you believe magic is real at all, you can't do any of it if you believe that everyone else has to help you. Anyway, guys, this has gone on long enough. This is D.H. Thorne signing off. If you want to support me in my work, you know what to do. There's links in the description, and I usually put an ad at the end of my videos. Thanks a lot for watching. Show me your support by making sure to like and comment on this video. Subscribe and hit the bell for updates, and then, if you wish, share this video responsibly. If you want to support me further, or want to know more about my practice, or learn to master your own, consider purchasing my high-quality book, Become the Maelstrom. The link is in the description. If you need my help, or want to book my professional services, you can contact me directly on Facebook, or go to FromTheAshesPublishing.com and look for my list of services under Magical Services. If you do not see a specific service or ritual that addresses your concern, contact me and I can tailor-make a custom ritual working just for you. The link for all this are in the description. Thank you, and mind the shadows.